You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, unusually for me, I'm writing from a wet, cool Florida. You found my podcast, Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, and I'm your host, Mighty Blue, known otherwise as Steve Adams. This is episode number 369 of the podcast, and as we like to do from time to time, our guest today is going to be telling us about not the Appalachian Trail, but the Kungsleden in Sweden. His name is Bob Delaney, though he goes, somewhat charmingly, by the name of John's dad. Bob wrote to me a while back, and I've been trying to fit our conversation into the schedule for a couple of months, especially because I wanted to include the link to the book that he's written about the trail. I got that a week or so back, and that will be in the show notes. John's dad will be on shortly. Of course, for us AT junkies, we still have a couple of catch-up interviews with our Mighty Blue class of 2023, with most of our team on the way. This week we'll hear from Chuck Faulkinberry, who, if you recall, injured himself and had to go home after he finished the Smokies. Spoiler alert, he's back out there, still heading north. Chuck will be on after Bob. Then one of our class members who hasn't started yet. Nancy Farrell's boyfriend has had a health scare, so we called up to check on the status of both him and her hike. We'll hear from Nancy after Chuck. And because several of you have emailed me to ask, I thought you might like to know my hiking plans in the coming months and, excitingly, next year. So I'll recap those between Chuck and Nancy. Chuck and Nancy, where have I heard that before? Then, in our reading today, after his return home to Connecticut, George Stefanos gets back on trail, trying to get his rhythm back as he heads north. So let's do it. Here's Bob Delaney, or John's dad. Oh, and by the way, we recorded this while the football season was still going on, so you're going to have to ignore the Packers and Jets references, neither of which improve much. Here's Bob. Our guest today reached out to me a few weeks ago to tell me about a trail that he'd hiked in Sweden, so I invited him on the show to share his story. This is Bob Delaney, or John's dad. Hey Bob, how are you?
Super great.
Super great. That's not a bad thing, is it?
No.
So let's clear up why you are named after your son. Isn't it normally the other way round?
Yeah, it would actually be. The scouts in our troop actually gave me that name. They called me John's dad because they didn't know my name, and there was Brian's dad and Joe's dad and Eric's dad, and I kind of liked the John's dad, and I just accepted it as my trail name.
Have you got other children?
No, I have a stepson who's 40-something, but
right.
No, he's my only son. So there's no jealousy going on.
Got it. Very cool. So before we get to the trail we're going to talk about, let's have a quick run through of your hiking past. How did you get into it in the first place? Was it the Scouts?
Yeah, it was. When I was a kid, I was in Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and every month our troop went backpacking. Year-round, I grew up in Wisconsin, and we did winter backpacking and camping. And for some reason, I liked being out in the cold, and just continued it, and did a lot of car camping when I was in college and after that. And when my son got into Scouts, my backpacking excitement grew again, and so we got into a backpacking troop, and we went almost every month backpacking someplace.
Oh, really? So you went with John, did you, I presume, as well?
Right. When he turned 11 and went across from Cub Scouts into Boy Scouts, we picked a troop that was a backpacking troop.
Nice.
Because of my history, and he enjoyed it and I enjoyed it, and so almost every month we'd go somewhere.
Is he still doing it now?
He's out of college and has a real job, and
that normally puts the end of it, doesn't it? Really?
Yes. But he did do the section of the AT with us this summer. Did the Allegheny Front Trail with us this fall. He's thinking about doing the AT section with us again next summer. I hike every summer, and actually 4 times a year, with a group of people that we originated in Scouts. So every week we do a week of the Appalachian Trail. And so John very likely will join us this summer again.
Nice, nice. And as it's actually called, this is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail. We will talk about your section in a minute of the Appalachian Trail. But first, and nobody can see this other than me, I see you're a Green Bay Packers supporter, which I've got to tell you, must have been a bad year for you this year.
This is a bad year. Though they did win last night.
They did. They've got to win the next 3 games, I think.
Yeah, well, I hope they do. I hate it when the season ends early and we don't even go to the playoffs.
Well, yeah, but we're used to that with the Jets. So. And so you mentioned about going on the AT. When did you first get on the AT, by the way?
The first time I went, I did a short section. I had you can't tell. I looked at my map over here. I've got it written out. Yeah. In 2014, I did a section in the White Mountains as my very first Appalachian Trail section.
In the White Mountains? Oh my gosh, that's a tough first section.
Yeah, I would recommend not doing that as your first section.
Yeah, I'd recommend not doing it as your 50th section.
Maybe not. It was tough, and we were in over our heads. We just didn't know how far in. But in 2016, we recommended to our troop that instead of a summer camp, a traditional summer camp, we do a week on the Appalachian Trail.
Lovely.
Work on all the merit badges you can do. And so it's a scout-led troop. So we let them make decisions. That they decided a different summer camp option. And the parents, we were standing around, we said, let's do it anyway. And so there were 11 of us that first year. We did the roller coaster.
Oh my gosh, you're making some bad choices, man, I'll tell you.
We really did. There were a couple people that called a shuttle after about 5 days, and they decided they had enough fun, and they skipped ahead to Harper's Ferry. Yeah, and we met up with them there. Then every year since, we've done a week on the Appalachian Trail.
What parts have you done then so far?
Let's see, we did north of Damascus, Harper's Ferry, of course. We did Shenandoah National Park.
That's more like it. That would have been a nice first section.
It was. Last summer, the group did Pine Grove Furnace State Park down to Harper's Ferry. I'm retired, so I started in Delaware Water Gap, met up with them in Pine Grove Furnace State Park, and then finished up that last week with them.
When I said to you, I'm going to share this with people, by the way, and you're not going to say it, I'm going to say it. It really made me laugh, actually. When I said to you, have you ever thought about doing an AT through hike? And you said, no, I like my wife.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm sure she'd be pleased to hear that you like her.
I like this wife. I did not like the other one, but this one I really like. And so she's very good-natured about it. I mean, she understands what I like to do. She does not like to do any kind of backpacking, being uncomfortable. But she tolerated me being gone for a month this summer and a week here and there. It's okay. But it's tough on both of us. So.
Yeah, it's funny, actually. It's a thing we don't actually talk about too much. I know we have talked about it once or twice on the show, but it's a big separation for people. If you're in a relationship and you go and it's often the man goes away. Well, I'm sure women do as well. So that was a stupid thing to say. But you separate from your partner for literally 6 months. I know sometimes they can come and visit you and so on, but that's quite a intense thing to sort of be away from somebody for that long. So and on that subject, I'm going to now turn to the trail we want to talk about. Which is this trail in Sweden, the Kungsleden. You already had an association with Sweden, though, didn't you? Tell us how you got to know the country in the first place.
Back in, probably 1974, back before the turn of the century, I got...
Great expression.
made friends with some exchange students, obviously from other countries, living in the States. And one of them suggested I apply to be an exchange student. So I did. And I was placed in Sweden. So I lived in Sweden for a year with two different families, way down south and then up in Gothenburg. And I lived basically 6 months with each family.
Right. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, it was hard. Living in another culture, learning a brand new language from scratch, it was tough. But yeah, it obviously life-changing. And I go back every 2 to 3 years. I was just back earlier this year. My last host parent passed away. So I went back for her funeral.
Yeah, that's sad. That's kind of sad, yeah, because, you spend, especially as you were a kid at the time, you were 16, 17? Or?
Turned 18 while I was there.
All right, okay.
When I got 17.
So you're a youngster, and you spend, some quite important years with another family, don't you? That's quite interesting, isn't it? And you get to know them, and they get to know you, and you learn Swedish fluently?
When I lived there, not so much. I struggled with it, but because I struggled, I made it my lifelong hobby. And my Swedish is 2 or 3 times better today than it was when I lived there, because I can go online, I can read books, watch Swedish TV, Swedish movies.
They're interesting. Yes. So you knew the country. So how did you get into the idea of discovering the Kungsleden? Did you actually discover the Kungsleden when you were there?
No, had no idea it existed. And a friend of mine told me about 10 years ago, I started babbling about it to him, that I wanted to go do this. And I don't remember the first time I heard of it, but in different backpacking Facebook groups, that kind of thing, somebody must have mentioned it. I started looking at it, looking for it, and gradually grew this desire that I'm going to go hike that thing.
Right. Well, we know that the Appalachian Trail is called the Appalachian Trail because it's through the Appalachian Mountains. Why is the Kungsleden called the Kungsleden?
Well, Kungsleden translates in English to the King's Trail.
Right.
And it actually didn't, it was started back in the late 1800s, but actually didn't get that name, wasn't ever called the King's Trail until about 1941.
All right.
And it's just a royal trail. The King's Trail would also, maybe you could translate it to the, not exactly, but to the Royal Trail.
Right.
Some scientists in Uppsala, a university city, thought about making this trail. And so it started in the late 1800s, and they got its King's Trail name in the 40s.
So tell us how what you know about the trail, obviously, apart from the fact that you've done it. and so where does it run from? Where does it finish? How long is it? And all that sort of stuff.
Well, it's a very northern part of Sweden. I mean, you literally can hike 2 more days and you're in Norway.
Right.
It's that far north. It doesn't go exactly north and south. Like I didn't draw a ruler, but it goes north and south almost exclusively between the different mountains and through the valleys. 270 miles long, so a little over 400 kilometers. The Swedish Tourist Association actually manages it, and they've set up about 20 huts, cabins, it's a day's hike apart. So they're going to be someplace 6 to 16 miles apart, and you can actually walk from hut to hut. And sleep inside if you've got if you pay for the reservation. That kind.
You mean not open-sided then? Not open face to the weather.
They don't have heat. They don't have electricity. They don't have running water. You have to take a pail down to the local stream, get some water. But they do have big tanks of propane in some of them where you can actually cook a hot meal. But you're doing it with your own lamplight at night. It's no electricity, no running water.
That's kind of cool. So were you ever in one of those huts at night by yourself?
No. It's virtually all of them have an on-staff host.
Oh, right. Okay.
So when you walk up, there's somebody that says, "Hi, welcome, and here's where you put your dirty shoes, and here's where you can dry out your stuff." They have a warming room or a drying room.
Sure.
Here's the procedure. There's where the water is. There's where the outhouse is. That kind of thing.
But you're used to backpacking. Did you stay in those things, or most of the time, or did you actually camp out? Because I know you mentioned a Swedish law, which allows you pretty much to camp wherever you like, doesn't it?
Yeah, the allemansrätten. It's every man's right. Following leave no trace and some very, very reasonable restrictions. Any place in Sweden you can camp for one night.
Okay. And
in the Swedish mountains, people take a lot of advantage of that. And I stayed in either a mountain cabin or a mountain station. And the station is a little bit more of a resort, not a resort. They've got electricity, running water, a shower, maybe a restaurant, a store. So I stayed in those maybe 5 nights out of the 20.
Right.
Otherwise, I was in a tent.
And a lot of this hike is within the Arctic Circle, is it? Or all of it?
Probably about 2/3 is north of the Arctic Circle.
So what temperatures are we talking about then? And what time of year did you go, Bubba? Because you went this year, didn't you?
I went in the summer of 21.
Oh, 21, right. You went in 21, that's right, yeah.
Yep. So the temperatures, it's 300 miles from north to south. It's the same climate, basically. And at night, it would sometimes get down into the 30s because I had frost on my tent sometimes. And it never hit 70, I don't think.
That's great weather to be hiking, though, isn't it?
Oh, it was wonderful. Yep. Yeah, so it was 40 to 65 degrees, and it wasn't bad. I went prepared for the cold weather, so I was never cold, really.
Right. And other trails, Is there any not similar, but is there any similarity between this particular trail and the US trails that you know of in terms of the grading, how it's graded and how it's maintained?
Sure. Well, the contrast it with the Appalachian Trail, the AT, that's the green tunnel, and
Yes.
on the Kungsleden, you're above tree line almost the whole time.
Oh my
You
gosh.
do have to go below tree line to do water crossings, but then on the other side you come back up and you're above tree line. So it's really more like the PCT, the section of the PCT that I've done that just you can see for 30 miles, and if you're hiking, you can see where you're going to camp tonight and maybe even camp the next night.
I've only been to Stockholm, which is a great city, I thought, anyway. I've only been to Stockholm when I've been to Sweden. So what elevation are we talking about now then?
The highest point in all of Sweden is 6,000 feet.
Oh, right. So really not that high then.
No, there's a mountain that's apparently the best view in all of Sweden called Skarfe, and that's about 3,900 feet. And you climb up a couple thousand feet to get to it.
Right. And as a trail, obviously we had the white blazers on the AT. What do you have on in the Swedish hike?
Well, there's actually two Kungsleden that kind of run together most of the time, the winter and the summer.
That would totally confuse me. That wouldn't work at all for me.
And I did take the winter trail one time by mistake, but only a few hundred yards.
Right.
The summer trail is marked in one county with orange blazes and in another county with red ones. And the way they do that is a little bit different than what the AT would do. They don't have trees above tree level. So what they've done is they've taken two big rocks at least the size of a bowling ball, if not bigger. They put both of them next to the trail and paint a blaze on top of the rock, so you can see it from both sides.
Nice.
So it's kind of the blaze is a topping on top of these big rocks, and then you walk between the two blazes.
And you did mention that it's normally north to south. Is there a reason for that?
Well, a couple of reasons probably. It started being built in Abisko, which is at the north end.
Right.
So that's where it started. And a lot of people take the train to Abisko, and you just get off the train and the trail is right there. You're within a couple hundred yards of the northern trailhead.
That's a good reason. That's a good reason to go there then. Yeah.
And there's several places that you can get off Kungsleden. You don't have to hike the whole way. About every week, there's a really good place to get off. You can take trains or buses to get back to civilization. Right, a lot of people will go down from Abisko down to a place called Singi, and then they'll go east. And that's when you get to the highest mountain at 6,000 feet, Kebnekaise. And so a lot of people start in Abisko, go down 4 or 5 days, turn east, climb the highest mountain, and then exit just east of that.
So if it's so remote or so relatively remote, you can get off every 5 or 6 days, do you have to carry a lot of food?
There's cabins and there's the stations. About every other cabin will sell food.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then all the stations, they have a full store and even a restaurant. So you don't actually have to, but the cabins are stocked with food by snowmobile and helicopter. So if you want to go in and buy, they don't have Mountain House, but they have the equivalent brands and other marks or other brands. And so instead of paying $10 for spaghetti and meatballs, you might be paying $20.
Who cares? Yeah, you're on a trip like that. Why'd you get? And also, interestingly, these shorter hikes they can afford to be more expensive, if you know what I mean. You have a 6-month hike, you've got a lot of money to spend all that time. A 20-day hike or 30-day hike, whatever it's going to be, you can afford to spend some money on that, can't you? Or one should be able to. So you should be able to expect to pay that sort of money for a decent amount of food.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
And you originally planned to do this in 2020, but obviously COVID rather.
Yep.
You also had a knee replacement. Was it that year or the year before?
In 2020 is when I had my right knee totally replaced.
Right.
So I'm not sure if I would have gone or not, but COVID made the decision for me, and then I could get my knee replaced, and so I did it. I did that too.
And how do you prepare for this hike? You do your sections in the AT, you say every month or so, which is probably great preparation for it. Or did you specifically go into other work and thinking how different it might be to other hikes you've been on?
With my knee replacement, I had physical therapy to do,
Sure.
which was strengthening the knee and the ankles and the hips. So I continued doing those exercises. But then I also put about 40 pounds in a backpack and would either walk just locally here, which is flat sidewalk residential area, but with not too far away, 10, 15 minutes away, you start getting into some rolling hills.
40 pounds is a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I ended up carrying on the Kings Trail, and it was too much. But so I would go out and I'd hike the local trails and go do 6 miles or 8 miles and do that 2 or 3 times a week.
But from what you've said, you can resupply fairly regularly. So was that 40 pounds you were carrying including food and water, or did you just take too darn much?
Well, I did take too darn much, but no, that was fully loaded. It was about 40 pounds with water.
Right, okay. Now, and the logistics of a hike like this are probably more extensive for foreigners, I guess, than they would be for hiking over here. Even traveling there, I mean, what do you have to do to get there? Is there what sort of visa requirements, and how easy is it to get there?
Well, for an American going over there, it's not a problem. You don't need a visa. And you can fly into Copenhagen, which is easy, fly into Gothenburg, fly into Stockholm. There's even an airport up near Abisko, that northern end at Kiruna. You could fly into there and then take trains to get to the northern trailhead. The way I got there is I went to Stockholm, took a night train up to a city called Umeå, and then took a 5-hour bus ride west.
Oh,
got off the bus and walked up a hill. I was on the Kings Trail.
All right. So you didn't do that thing of going there by train, because you said it's right outside the train station.
Well, I took from Stockholm, I took a train up north. There was a night train, and then took a bus over because you can't take train to the southern entrance.
Oh, right. Okay. So, and you mentioned the resupply options at the cabin and the trail towns. How many trail towns are there, by the way? Do you go through a town quite regularly or not?
No. You'll go a few days before you come to any kind of a real community. At some of the boat crossings, I think there's 7 water crossings where you can take a boat. There might be a group of 5 to 10 houses.
Oh, right. So not exactly a town then.
No.
No, okay. And I know that you actually made 4 resupply boxes for yourself. Was that quite complicated to work out how to do with them?
It actually was. It was way more complicated than it really should have been. Depending on where it was going, you had to use 1 or 2 services, and there's advice on the Swedish Tourist Association's website. Right. You either send it by the normal mail system, or there's a bus goods where they put it under a bus and it shows up eventually. Right. And so at 4 places where that was possible, 4 of them, I put together a resupply box for myself that had 4 days worth of food. Right. And some extra chapstick and hydrocortisone cream, things I might need to replace.
Sure. Did you need those? Did you need them?
One of them. I really wouldn't have needed all 4, and next time I won't do it at all. I can live. I did get to one of the mountain stations in Kvikjok, where they had lots and lots. They had like 30 freeze-dried meals, vegetarian mushrooms with rice, every single one of them. They had no variety at all.
So what? It's like having oatmeal for breakfast every day. It's okay.
Right, and I had heard that on the trail for several days that the supply options at Kvikjok were limited. And the resupply box that I sent there, that helped. But I actually, next time I'll probably just send 1 resupply box, and that might just be it.
And was the navigation on the trail itself, you mentioned the blazes, was it quite tricky, or did you need maps? I mean, how did you manage navigation?
Well, I'm a big map and compass guy. I taught map and compass classes for REI.
All right.
I have to take my paper map and my compass, and I don't know if I will next time. The maps weighed 1/2 pound in total, and they were excellent maps. I knew where I was, but I also used iPhone apps. I use Gaia a lot, and really didn't need a map. Even in bad weather, let's say it's foggy and rainy, the theory under these blazes is that you can stand at one and see the next one, and that's almost never the case, but that's the theory. In Sweden, that is the case. You can see the next blaze and the blaze after that. It would be virtually impossible to get lost if you're paying attention.
But you did get lost. You went on the wrong one.
Well, I did. The winter and summer trails diverge And I followed the winter trail for a couple hundred yards, and I'm thinking, this is wrong. The nature of the trail changed. It was more overgrown. It wasn't well worn. And off to my right, about 10 yards, comes a guy from Germany, Pontus, and I can't see that trail because it's all behind bushes. And I said, okay, I know what I did here. And I said, hey, are you on the summer trail? Yeah. Where are you? So I cut cross country about 10 yards and got back on the summer trail.
Right. Was there much of a community on the trail, and does it have the same vibe to it?
No, it doesn't. People are hiking more alone. You will hike with people, and I did that. And just mentioning Kvikyok again, I did meet up with a guy from Vietnam and a woman from Germany, Carol, and we hiked together then to the end. But for the most part, people are hiking either by themselves or with people they came with.
Right.
You didn't get a tramley thing. That wasn't a normal thing. And for sure, like trail names aren't a thing because you never really talk to other people too much.
Right.
You wouldn't see them the next night and the next night.
Yeah. Did you like that? Did you like that lonesome type of hiking or not?
No. I was actually, my hope, I mean, it turned out great. I want to do it again. But my hope was that they fall into that rhythm. Everybody's hiking 10 to 15 miles a day, maybe 20 miles, and you kind of see people over and over. And it wasn't actually until my last night on trail, I got to a campsite up near Abisko, about 4 miles south of it. Uh-huh. And so we were going to stop there and then go into town and finish the trail the next day. And some women from Latvia pulled in, put up their big tent, pulled out a real frying pan and real lawn chairs. And they cut up their food and made a whole meal out of this and pulled out some bottles of wine. And when they got all done, they offered me their leftovers. But I had to eat it out of the frying pan because they had filled my mug with the wine.
Does not make them better people, by the way, filling your mug with wine.
It was great. We sat and we talked for a couple hours. And it was all in English. That's the language of the King's Trail. Even the Swedes will speak to each other in English because it's just easier. Yes, everybody knows English. Yeah. And so we sat around. There was no campfire there, but we sat in a circle right around where the campfire should be. And people from France, Thailand, Germany, the Latvians, me. Boy, there could have been somebody else too. And just sat and talked and told jokes and stories and where have you hiked? And that was the kind of almost daily thing I was hoping for. And it really didn't happen until the end.
As an American, in your case, and as a Brit in my case, we are the luckiest, laziest people in the world when it comes to languages. But you could speak to them in Swedish as well, so that must have been pretty cool as well.
Oh yeah! Every time that I ran into somebody, I'd always open the conversation in Swedish, and probably half the people, maybe less, were Swedish. Most of the people are actually from Germany, Netherlands, other countries.
Right. And I've been looking down a list of one or two of your highlights and so on. You said you actually only met two other Americans on the entire hike. One was actually studying in Sweden and the other one was married to a Swede. So this is not a well-known hike for Americans to be hiking, I presume.
No, well, it's hard to get to. It is airfare to Sweden. I just checked recently for another trip, and it's going to be $1,000 for a trip that adds. You can go to the PCT or AT for a lot less than adding $1,000 on top. Sure. And then there's a full day travel from Stockholm up to the trail, and then after the trail, it's a full day back. So there's a lot of overhead to get there.
And one of the things, now that I'm looking down this list now as well, about you said the sun never actually goes down. No. It never got totally dark. That is weird on all sorts of levels, particularly on the other end of that thing is when the sun never comes up. That must be horrendous in the winter.
Yeah, I was up north. One of my other host parents passed away at Christmas time a few years ago in 2016. And so I went back for his funeral, and it was at dark. And I visited some friends up north, and I said, hey, we got to get to the train. I've got a night train at 10 o'clock. I need to get to the train station. And they said, well, it's only 3 o'clock, Bob. It was pitch dark outside.
Oh my gosh, I would find that very strange. I think they have, suicide's a big thing over there in the winter, isn't it? Because
and that's what I've heard, and I haven't checked recently, but I've heard that in the past. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this other list. You said there's reindeer everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Are they friendly? Because I'm told that moose aren't friendly, so I don't know what reindeer are like compared to moose.
Unfortunately, I didn't see any moose, but the reindeer are kind of skittish.
All right.
If you get within 200 yards of them, they're starting to move off, and they might even kind of jog away. In fact, the hiking season is really from mid-June until mid-September, partially because of the weather.
Sure,
but
sure.
But it doesn't start before mid-June because that's the reindeer calving season. And they don't want people in the mountains spooking the reindeer, because the reindeer will abandon their calves. They'll get spooked and disappear. So it's real dangerous for the reindeer for us to be out there before the middle of June.
And you obviously enjoyed it, the whole thing.
Oh,
but
yeah.
You said you did have a low point. So tell us about your low point. You had a tough day.
I had a real bad time. I was physically exhausted, and it was raining. It was probably 40 degrees. And so, okay, I'm going to stop. The next place that there's a flat spot, I'm going to stop and set up my tent. And it was about 5 miles after that I found the first spot.
Oh.
And I was just bad. Every step was horrible. The trail was full of water. There was either trees, really dense trees, or really uneven ground, half of it covered with water. There was no place to set up a tent, even and accept a bad tent setup. Say, well, that's really leaning too much, or that's doesn't look good. There's too many rocks. There was nothing. And so finally I got to this, there's a raging river. It was really cool. Rapids, just beautifully. On a podcast, you can't see the picture real well, but it was beautiful. And there were 2 bridges going across it. And I knew that if I got up onto that first bridge, I would likely fall into the water. I didn't have coordination and strength left.
Oh my gosh.
I put myself way in over my head. A big mistake. I should have stopped 5-6 hours earlier,
Sure.
rather than trying to push through some more miles. And as it turned out, I turned around and said, I got to go back. I don't know where I'm going to go, but I can't go forward. That's going to kill me. I will not make it over that river. I turned around, and right there at the edge of the river, there was a whole mess of bushes, small bushes, maybe 6 inches to a foot high, but it was flat and dry. And so I set up my tent on those bushes. I mean, you shouldn't do that, but that was my choice.
Do you know what? It doesn't matter where you're hiking. The trail provides somewhere another along the line. Isn't that amazing that could happen to you? So I bet you slept well that night, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I did. It was blowing and winding all night. I slept fitfully, on and off.
Sure.
Normally I'm up. I'm 5:36. I'm up and gone. And I laid in the tent until 11. I didn't want to get up. I was just exhausted. And I needed that extra 6 hours or 5 hours of just sleep and rest. And don't copy me, but I actually ate 2 meals in my sleeping bag. I never do that. I never eat in my tent. I never.
Don't try this at home.
Yeah, I got to eat my meals, and I got to rest and listen to podcasts. I listened to some of your podcasts while I was doing that.
Cool. So, I didn't know my show has been heard in Sweden. Cool. So you actually fell a couple of times as well. Were they bad? Were they bad falls? Is it difficult terrain or not? Because you say it's a bit like the PCTs. So there's not really. Is there much scrambling?
No, there's a lot of rocks, and some of the trail is just absolutely beautiful, the best you could ever expect. But there are a lot of places where there's rocks, and because it rains quite a bit, quite often they're slippery. And that's when I fell, trying to go too fast over some rocks, boom, and I would go down.
Yeah.
For the most part, I wasn't hurt. I did get a huge bruise on my leg, about the size of a dinner plate from one fall. Nice. But no serious, a small cut one time. But I took a picture and sent the picture of the cut to my wife, and she thought it was really bad. But it just looked bad. It was more of a good scratch.
That was not a smart thing to do. I've got to tell you. She must have looked. Is he asking for permission to come home, or does he want me to say to him, "You've got to come home now"? That was not a good idea.
No, maybe it wasn't. No.
So did you vlog or blog on the trail? Do you do that sort of thing? Because I tell people in the past, and if you've heard the show, you probably know I say this, that days when you're hiking, especially longer distances, do tend to run into each other, don't they? So you need to remember this stuff. Did you do that?
I didn't separately do it, but I had a spreadsheet. I'm a spreadsheet.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
So I would update where I actually stayed. I had my plan for where I was going to stay, but I'd update the spreadsheet for where I actually stayed. And then I had these heavy paper maps. And every day at the end of the day, I would write down on the map physically. I went here, was a beautiful water crossing. I met the Annelies from Belgium here. And I made notes. And then I came home and spent 2 weeks transcribing my memories and my notes into... I'm hoping to be a book on Kungsleden, how to hike it.
Nice. That'd be a nice idea, yeah. That's cool.
Writing a book is a lot of work, though, you might know.
Tell me about it, yeah. Bloody nightmare. It takes ages, doesn't it? Yeah. And you've got a sort of a new YouTube channel about backpacking. Is that specifically for there, or does that include some stuff from Kungsleden?
Oh, right now I don't have lots of stuff on Kungsleden out there for some food and some planning. But I'm working on the videos to include more of what I actually did on Kungsleden. But it's more of aimed at beginners and how-to stuff. I do a lot of dehydrating of food or food prep, and then how to navigate, how to follow blazes, how to set up your tent, how to hang a bear bag. Yeah. So that's where it is. It's an intro kind of YouTube channel. Well,
look, I'll share the links, any links you want to give me for either YouTube channel or anything to do with Kungsleden as well. You also generously said you'll be happy to share your email address if people want to get in touch with you. If you're still okay with that, that's fine. You can back out now if you like as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what's that? And we'll put it in the show notes anyway.
It's JonsDadHikes, and it's John, Jons, JonsDadHikes at gmail.com.
Okay. JonsDadHikes at gmail.com. Just one more question. Having been on the AT for some period of time and now having done this trail, and I'm sure you've done other trails as well, what differences do you think people should be looking for if they want to head abroad and hike? Is there some different mindset, or is it just hike's a hike?
Boy, that's interesting. It'll be something to think about. So the King's Trail's the one I did in Sweden. I did a shorter one in Indonesia on a volcano, and it really, once you got there, it was the same. People had a lot of the same equipment. They would hike the same miles. They might not have the exact same brand of things, but they would have parallel things and do parallel things. It was very much a hiking community that could exist anywhere.
Yeah, and I love that. I suspected that would be the case. We didn't actually talk about that, but I love the fact that it would be that way as well. Hikers all over the world have this feeling for each other and a mutual respect when you meet each other on the trail. I'm just glad it exists out there as well. Yeah. Well, look, this has been fascinating for me because, I've never heard of any other hikes in Sweden at all. Not that I've been looking for them, but, the fact that there was one out there and you reached out to me, I appreciate you reaching out to me. And thanks for coming on the show to share the story of the hike as well.
Well, thanks.
Appreciate it. Take it easy, all right?
Yep.
I like to feature different trails from time to time, and this one is one I'd never heard of. John's dad, has written a book about Kungsleden, so I've added a link to the show notes along with his YouTube channel and his blog. I've also added, with his permission, his email address in case you wanted to contact him directly about the trail. That thing about it always being dark or light. I remember once I was in Oslo on business and I came out of a club, it was a while ago, and it was about 11:30 at night and it was still light. In fact, the street lights came on just as we came out. Then it was kind of murky for about 2.5 hours. Then it was fully light before 3 o'clock in the morning. It's really spooky. I enjoyed talking with Bob about the Kungsleden, so if you've done an unusual trail, please let me know and perhaps we can get you on the show too. Just write to me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com and I'll get in touch. Now, when we last spoke with Chuck Faulkinberry, he was off the trail with leg trouble. Let's hear what's going on now. Here's Chuck.
Hello.
Hey, Chuck. Good morning. How are you?
Good, Steve. How are you?
Well, I'm delighted with the message you sent me. Because last time we spoke, you sound a bit down. You had to get off the trail because you were concerned about obviously your knee. But things have changed. Right. Things have changed quite a bit. First up, though, before we start with what's actually happened, tell us how far you got first time and how far you're into this.
So total, I'm about 250 miles in,
Mhm.
and then not including what I'm doing right now, the flip-flop miles. I haven't calculated those up.
Right.
But about 250 miles in, got through the Smokies, which was where I injured my knee and then walked on it for 7 days.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so yeah, that's it's not that far. I felt like I would be much farther, but I've just been trying to make the good decisions, and that's kind of where I am. Seems like a long journey to be just 250 miles.
Well, I started. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yes, I think when you look at that in context of what it is, 250 miles is a long way. Yeah, you're just over 10%.
Yeah, I know.
And and funny enough, it's kind of good to get a reminder of how long this can be, and it really can be a heck of a long way. But you got injured, and I think you got off trail. Was it Hot Springs?
Just before Hot Springs, right at Max Patch.
Okay, right. So you told us before that you were going to see your orthopedic doctor, and that has happened now. So tell us where you are. What's going on?
Yeah, so I saw the orthopedic, and of course, with doctors, it takes a little while to you've got to get the X-ray and all that kind of stuff. They got to get the results, and came back, and he said definitely an MRI. So I had the MRI, and that had to be read, and finally he was able to look at it. I definitely injured part of my cartilage in my knee, as well as he saw like a hairline fracture on the femur.
Oh, good Lord.
And he said that is something that's just basically wear and tear, and it could have been there, just from years of abuse, or it could have been something that I worsened. Also bruised my bones, or my what's the stuff inside the bone? I can't remember. Anyway, there were several things on the results that just didn't look right. And in addition to being older and having just your wear and tear and deterioration, natural deterioration. Yeah. So he said, we can get in there and fix it. You should have surgery at some point, he said, but if you're willing to get out there, as long as you wear a brace and as long as you take a day off each week, not 2 weeks, and ice and elevate. And he gave me some painkillers and so on and so forth. And he said, you can go as long as you can stand it. And then when you're ready to do the surgery, just let us know.
Is he, when you're listening to this, and I'll tell you just telling me what he told you, my heart would have kind of dropped quite a lot, actually, because he's saying to you, this is wear and tear. Well, trust me, man, you're going to get a lot of wear and tear in the next few months, obviously. And I'm sure you're aware of that as well. So did you say that he says you can go back, or you're fine to go back, but and is he saying that you're likely to be interrupted before the end?
He didn't give me any kind of a percentage, and there's the big part of me that wants to make this trek. I want to do the trail.
I know.
And I think that really kind of overrode what I was hearing. He was very tentative. He said, you could go back, but ultimately you will end up having surgery. So it was up to me and how much pain I'll be able to stand over time or not. And so I had heart to heart with my wife and everything. She said, if you don't do this, if you quit now, you'll always think about it.
Bless her.
And I've got a few more years.
Damn right.
Following your example, I got a few more years where I could get back out on the trail.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. But he's not saying that you can do permanent damage, or he's saying that damage that you've done can be fixed. I mean, this is what I would listen to. Personally, I'm saying absolutely not a doctor, but I'm listening to you telling me what he said.
Sure. Yeah.
Is he saying that we can fix this, and whatever you do to it, we can still fix it? Is that what he's saying? Because you've got that sort of injury that with a bit more wear and tear, another 2,000 miles of wear and tear, it's going to be still fixable. Is that what he's saying to you?
Yes, that's what I took away from it. Was it's not like
hang on, which means that may not be what he said to you then.
Right? Yeah, he wasn't that specific, but he was like, yeah, we can take care of this. But it's up to me to determine when I want to go through with it.
Right. Now, you sent me this email on the 1st of April. We're now recording on the 6th of April. So what did you do? Did you go back to Max Patch and go from there? How did it work out?
No, actually, I decided to do a flip-flop to try to get back on schedule because I was out for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And it basically with my leg up in the air with ice on it for that entire time.
Oh.
And so I wanted to find terrain that would be relatively flat or,
Yes.
somewhat easy to get started again because I've got to build my legs back up. And so I decided to do a flip-flop. And so I flew up to Washington, went over to Harper's Ferry and started from there. And so now I'm in Maryland. I've done about 25 miles in Maryland.
I bet you enjoyed that first 3 miles, didn't you? Out of Harper's Ferry, the flat bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, I thought, oh, well, this is a perfect trail. And but Maryland kind of fooled me. The second day, it was just so rocky. The trail was so rocky, and that was a rough day. And then the third day, it flattened back out. Or yesterday, when I was doing my Nero, I'm in town primarily because of the weather, but also trying to fulfill my commitment to being off my leg at least once a week.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to coincide those with any kind of weather that might be coming through.
Do you know what? I think you're handling it really well, mate, because, this is early in this trip, for you to have to cope with it and get it better and listen to what he says. You just got to listen to what he says there, definitely elevate it and ice it. But so when you set off from Harper's Ferry, went over the bridge and did that long flat walk on the canal path, how did it feel in those first, say, 2 or 3 miles, say?
I was doing really well. Of course, I'm medicated. Early on, I take the medication before I get on the trail. So the first few miles on all 3 days have been fine.
Right.
And then I start to feel how it's wearing throughout the day. So I'm not doing big miles. I'm doing less than 10 right now.
That's great.
And so again, trying to listen to my body and build up to those bigger miles.
Yeah. And you sound very, very, what's the word for it? You sound very stoic about it, and very determined to get it done. But you're not fooling yourself, are you? You're listening to, you're feeling what's happening to you. Does it feel, it's not got back to the stage it was that made you get off, is it?
No, not at this point. The second day it was starting to concern me a little bit,
sure.
I'm starting to feel some of the pains and the popping and stuff. I was definitely feeling that. So It was concerning, and it helped to make my decision like, let's get off and ice it and just take care of it for a day and see what happens.
So the plan is to go from Harper's all the way to Kungsleden by midsummer.
Yeah.
And you're going to, so your Kungsleden will be max patch.
Correct.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one, by the way. I've heard many worse.
Yeah, I'm excited. And the thing is, there was so many beautiful things I wanted to see, whether it's the Triple Crown Max Patch, going through the first town, Hot Springs, and doing those kind of things that really excited me about the Virginia portion. Of course, I maintained part of the Virginia portion, so I was excited to see that again.
Yeah.
But I'm not as familiar with the northern part of the trail, and there's so many exciting things. I mean, just the history, just in the last 3 days that I've been able to walk through or walk next to,
it's great,
has just been amazing.
I love it. I actually wanted to do a podcast about the history of the trail. And the person I tapped up to do it, we never worked it out. But I think somebody doing that would be really interesting because there are so many great historical markers along the trail you can really get into, I should think, when you're, in terms of a podcast. And people would like to listen to it, I suspect, when they're going through those areas. So, So you're now on day 3, is it? Day 3 or day 4 or day 5, something like that?
Day 4, day 4 of the flip-flop.
And you know you're going to come to Pennsylvania eventually soon.
Pretty soon.
Yeah, but the southern part of Pennsylvania is fine. It's just the northern part. And by then, your legs should be a whole lot tougher. So I think you've started back at a great spot, and I'm excited for you that you're back into it now. And are you meeting many people on the trail now? You starting to flip, or you're only meeting flip-floppers?
I'm meeting some section hypers, a couple of, or one guy that's doing a lash. He does a lash for over a 4-year period. And then I've actually connected with a couple of northbounders that started really early,
Right.
And have skipped around a little bit. And so, I know the bubble's a few weeks behind me, but I know they're going to catch me pretty quick.
And you're happy to stay ahead of the bubble if you can, but you're also you've met people you've liked anyway, so you're happy to meet these people coming through.
Yeah. I mean, it's that community. I mean, everybody's just so great. The hiking community is just so great. It's so easy to meet people, and everybody's willing to help and do whatever for each other.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't be more pleased with you back out there. Just I know you're going to listen to what you want to listen to, and but it's up to you to interpret that as best you can. We'll catch up again in a couple of weeks and see how you're going. Okay.
Okay. Sounds great.
Thanks, man.
Steve.
Take it easy.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
He's back. Excellent news. I met Chuck at our Woods Hole weekend, and he was determined to get this done. So I'm really glad he's been able to get it back out there. Still, he's going to have to listen to his body going forward. He's going to tell him whether it's time to pack up, or indeed, which I hope, that all's well and he should carry on. Actually, mentioning the Woods Hole weekend, don't forget our Woods Hole weekend video series. It's an investment in your hike, and until the end of this month, you can get the whole 13 or 14 hours of video for $100 off. As I've said, you should look at it more as an investment in your success on the trail. Check it out at the Woods Hole Weekend tab on hikingradionetwork.com. So, before we hear from Nancy Farrell, I just wanted to let you all know about my own hiking plans for this and next year. Some of you may remember in the early days of the podcast, I think it was episode 11, that I had a guy as a guest on the show, John O'Shea, or Skizix, and he invited me to join a group of hikers called the Fat Guys Back in the Woods. Which wasn't very kind of him, by the way. Well, I went on a hike with him and I really enjoyed it. And on that hike, I also met another guest, and now a good friend, Nate Stockton. So I have an affinity for the group. Well, John and I, plus maybe a couple of others, are going on what he's calling the 2023 lollygagging hiking trip. Straight after trail days, we're going to drive about 40 trail miles south and walk back to Damascus over 5 days. It should be fun and it should be easy. And I intend to podcast the trip. Then, after our next Woods Hole weekend in early October, Jester and I, and whoever else wants to come, will be hiking from somewhere north of Damascus, also back into the town. This is so we can attend the Order gathering in Abingdon, where I believe we're both going to be speaking. Once more, it should be great. Then, excitingly, next year, in April and May, I've committed to hiking the subject of a recent podcast, the South West Coast Path in the UK. It's about 650 miles, and the itinerary I'll be following will take us 52 days. Once more, I'll podcast and keep you all in the loop. I've reached out to several friends and some family, and I'll have company for some of the time. If any of my British listeners are around that way, let's meet up for a beer one night. So that's what I'll be doing. I really don't think I have another 2,000 miler in me anymore, but of course, never say never. Now, let's hear about the dilemma that Nancy Farrell and her boyfriend are facing right now. Here's Nancy.
Hello.
Hey, Nancy. Steve, how are you?
Hey, Steve, I'm good. And you?
Yes, not too bad. Not too bad. You texted me just now, so let's record.
Yeah.
So let's record. So what's going on?
Well, you were wondering what was happening. So,
yes.
I'm still wanting to hike.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know exactly when I'll be able to start.
Right.
So as I mentioned to you before, my boyfriend was taken ill on the eve of my flight to go east to Quebec to be with my mom, and then to go to New Hampshire to pick up my gear.
Wow, I didn't know it was as close as that.
It was at the 11th hour. Oh. He was also due to fly to Vancouver to do some work for Special Olympic, and it was in hindsight, it was super fortunate that we were still together, and we were both in Calgary as well, of all place, where there's hospitals and doctors.
Sure.
We went in our little hometown in British Columbia. So, it was all fortunate, and, he's good. He's stabilized, but there is lots of tests that had to be done, and
Of course.
most of them we've gotten results from, and very happy that they're positive. But we're just waiting for one final one, and that one should come to us sometime. We're hoping by the end of the week.
Right.
And then from those results, we will know. We already know that he has to have some surgery. We just don't know what kind of surgery, whether it's minor or more of a major surgery.
Sure.
So hopefully, we'll know by the end of the week. And then if it's a minor surgery, he's already told me that he's pushing me out the door, and he wants me to go. And I said, well, we will see, how much there is in the recovery.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's been, to be very frank with you, it's been a roller coaster because, you can empathize, and I'm sure all your listeners will empathize. We work so hard and so long to prepare, and you're so vested into it.
Of course.
And you're so excited and everything, and you just really feel like it's just, the rug is being pulled from underneath your feet. It's just, it's really tough. But I think what made it tougher for me is that I couldn't allow myself to feel anything about it, because I felt, I'm going to probably laugh, but I felt some kind of like selfish to even be thinking about me when my boyfriend was the one that was having a health issue, and I thought really, the mountains, my head kept being super, rational about it. Like, you're fine, the mountains are going to be there, you'll just go later. So practical in my head. But then I was, all of a sudden I would tear up, and I was like, what's going on? Why am I so, why am I like this? But eventually my boyfriend and I, we talked about it, and we said, hey, it's like, allow yourself to feel this. He says, it's like you're grieving. You've worked so hard for something, and that's been taken away from you.
Yes.
And I felt so good that he understood that, and I guess I think from that moment I kind of felt better right away, because I allowed myself to feel the disappointment and, I
understand.
The normal emotion that comes with it.
So where actually is your head right now then? Is your head on the trail right now, or do you feel you're in transition? Do you think you'll be going?
Yes, I think I'm going to be going. I have faith that whatever surgery he has to have, we're both very confident that he's going to recover well from that.
Right.
So that being said, it would mean that, I can go. The only difference is that the timing of it will be different. So if I can go soon, if he has a surgery and it's minor, and I can kind of go east sooner, then, I'll be able to start earlier. But if it's a more of a major surgery, then I want to stay with him and be with him until he needs me. But even in that situation, again, on the proviso that he recovers well from either surgery, right? But if he has a major surgery, I would still be going, but again, it's just going to be a little later. So my head is still in it, absolutely. I'm still watching all these YouTubers. I'm actually still listening to your podcast, and my head is definitely in it. But what I've started to do, and I think that was my question to you when we were quickly texting the other day, is it's obvious I'm not going to do a true no-bow anymore, because I'll be too late.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of look at the options, and obviously one of the options, which is the more likely one, is I'll do a no-bow flip-flop.
Have you considered a Sobo?
I have considered it too, but I just think like the Sobo, from everything I read is and heard, is it's harder to start, from Kungsleden and go south.
Sure.
And I don't know. And then on the flip side, the flip flop is much easier at the beginning, right? Because you're just out of Harper's Ferry. small flats. You do the rocks of Pennsylvania.
It's easier for about 3 miles when there's a flat walk out of what do you call it, out of Harper's Ferry. Maryland was so much tougher than I remembered. I remember first time I thought it was easy. Second time I found it tougher. So
Really?
I don't think any of it's easy, because soon you come to Pennsylvania and that will knock your socks off. It's tough.
Yeah.
So now, although to be fair, Nancy, you've read enough about this. This is not an easy thing to do anyway. You've got to get, in my opinion, you need to get your head right about your domestic situation and that you're comfortable leaving. But always remember, by the way, you are this trail is so accessible and so easy to get off that you literally could be, you could leave with 10 minutes notice, and you could be off in about an hour or 2 hours from most places. So don't worry too much. Don't worry too much about that. You can get off, but you've got to get your head right with where you want to be, because what you don't want to be doing is hiking and concentrating about what's going on at home, because that's going to be tough for you.
No, I agree 100% with you. And there's no way I'm leaving if I'm not comfortable, and if my boyfriend Jack is not comfortable. You know, I mean, when I leave, it's because we both feel that it's okay, and my head will be with the mountains for sure, and I won't be worried about his health. So 100% on that. Yeah, it's just a matter of where I start and when I start, basically, I think.
Well, when do you get the news? Is it this week or next week, you say?
Well, we're optimistic and hopeful that it will be by Friday, but we're at the mercy of labs and doctors. Yeah. So we'll just wait and see.
But you know what, though, this is not a late time. This is not a late time to start now. In the next 2 weeks, it's not a late time to start. 6 months will take you through to the beginning of October. That's fine. So I wouldn't give up entirely. Yeah. I wouldn't give up entirely on Nobo, but at the same time, you've got to do what you feel comfortable. If you're worried, and one thing to think about: if you started in Georgia, and you found you weren't getting, after 2 months, say, you weren't making the progress you wanted to make, and you're worried about getting Katahdin, you can then flip up to Katahdin, do Katahdin, and then come back south, and you could mix and match it, because it just has to be that connected footpath, and you can connect them anytime you like, Yeah. So, I would not give up a Nobo if I were you personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. The only thing is that realistically, even if we hear from the doctor, then you have surgery, and, the scheduling of surgery, again, that's an unknown. Is it going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks? So that's why I'm thinking that by the time he has surgery, it's probably going to put me to mid-May, early May to mid-May. And what I said too is that I also want to, when I leave the west coast of Canada, I'm going to head east, and I want to spend at least a little time with my mother in Quebec City before I disappear on the trail. Right. So I'm thinking more mid-May would be awesome, but it's probably going to be early June by the time I start. And that's why I was thinking flip-flop, because that would be probably too hot down south in Georgia. But
of course, that this is what you have to do when you're hiking. Things never work out how you think they're going to work out. If the destiny of your hike this year is to start Harper's Ferry, that's fine, because you'll still have a great time. Yeah. But always remember, I don't know whether time's a constraint for you, but always remember that, as you said earlier, these mountains ain't going away. So you could always do it again next year if you wanted to, although I know it's disappointing to do that. But if it was important to you to do a Nobo, then you might have to wait till next year, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point. That's something I have to think about. Is it really more important for me to do a true Nobo, as I had my head, in my mind set to it, or is it just being on the trail and any flip flop, any which way, works? Yeah. And I think it's the latter. I just want to be in the mountain. I just want to be walking. So I think that any flip flop or any which way is going to work, and whatever date it is that I'm starting, I'm thinking I'm going to do something. So that's where my head is right now, anyway.
All right. Well, look, I appreciate you letting me know, and just keep me in touch and with how things are going. And I'm probably going to put this out. This is April the 4th. I probably won't put it out till a week and about 9 days' time. So you'll then, people, you might be able to let me know before then whether you're going or not. So just stay in touch, and we'll catch up in the next couple of weeks, okay?
That's perfect, Stephen. I will definitely know more by then. So I'll text you and give you any update if there's something to give you as well. So then you can add to the notes as well.
Okay. Well, keep the dream alive. Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Oh, I'm keeping the dream alive. Thank you for your time, Steve. Right. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye then.
Bye.
Bye. Now that there is a perfect example of how plans can change. And you need to be able to adapt to those changes on the fly. Thankfully, this health scare manifested itself before she left for the trail, so Nancy and her boyfriend are reacting to those changing circumstances. In fact, it seems like we kind of played out her internal struggle in our conversation. But now the good news. I heard from her on Wednesday morning that he doesn't have cancer, which was their fear, and he has a small surgery in a couple of weeks. To that end, Nancy is lining up a flip-flop from Harper's Ferry starting June the 1st. That's great news for both of them. Thanks this week go to our wonderful donors, without whom we would not be able to continue. This week, our monthly donors are Natisha Webb and Gail Posey, while we also got generous donations from Thomas Gallagher and Mark Hyman. Mark wrote me a very nice email and followed up with the donation a few hours later. Thanks to all of you who keep us afloat. Finally today, in Then the Howl Came, George Stefanos has made the decision. He's back on the trail after some rest at home in Connecticut. I'll see you next week. Chapter 16. A New Beginning. Greenwood Lake, New York to Kent, Connecticut. Saturday, the 6th of August 1983, mile 1340. I spent Monday afternoon in that diner in Greenwood Lake, waiting for my ride and rehoning my rusty social skills with a very pretty and friendly waitress. Having spent 3 months in the forest playing nature boy, my hormones can sometimes revert to teenage levels at the sudden appearance of feminine beauty. It's sort of like deep water diving. If you come up too fast, you can get the bends. My mother and my brother Mike drove up from Connecticut to meet me. My mum asked if I wanted to drive home. That was a remarkable adventure. After months of the leisurely Stone Age crawl of the Appalachian Trail, I suddenly found myself thrust into the technological marvel of New York City and Connecticut traffic. Driving about 60 miles per hour felt like flying. I was marvelling at the breathtaking rush of miles blurring past. I was just about the slowest car on the road. People were rocketing by me, and the usual lunatics were cutting me off with the usual insane manoeuvres. I had no opportunity to lose my temper. I couldn't stop laughing. It was like a sick video game. I never dreamed that sharing a road with all those morons could be such fun. I was back at home Monday night, lying in air-conditioned splendour and being fed by my Italian grandmother. The days drifted along pleasantly. Each night I told myself that I would go back to the trail tomorrow. This morning I woke up and knew that this was it. If I did not drag my butt back to the trail today, I could kiss the through hike goodbye. Each day it was becoming easier to stay off the trail. My mother and brother escorted me back to the trail. I drove again, laughing all the way. I sure wish I could bottle that feeling and use it for the rest of my life as I drive in Connecticut traffic. I got some more miles out of the way today, a whole 6 of them. Nevertheless, the fact that I did any mileage at all today was the crucial factor. Overcoming my lethargic inertia of being back home was probably the last great battle I needed to win in order to finish this hike. Now, it's just a question of staying focused for about 2 more months. They dropped me off at 4 o'clock this afternoon at the point where I left the trail on Monday. While I was getting my gear ready to resume my hike, a through hiker came by. I won't use his real name or real trail name in this story. For the purposes of this tale, let's say that his trail name was Crazy Charlie, and he was just possibly the biggest bullshitter who I ever met on this trail of bullshitters. He spent about 15 minutes regaling my family and myself with tall stories about hiking 45-mile days with a 75-pound pack, while my brother and I just looked at each other and tried not to laugh. It quickly became obvious that Charlie was one of those guys who constantly hitchhike around large stretches of the Appalachian Trail. Unlike most, he refuses to admit it. Therefore, he must make up these stories to explain sudden 35 and 40-mile leaps he makes in one day. Unfortunately, not having hiked these stretches, he's unaware of what an idiot he sounds like. For instance, to cover the distance he claims to have covered today, he would have needed to average better than 4 miles per hour over a stretch of trail that includes the climb up Whale Wonder Mountain and those rock climbs on Belleville Mountain, among other insanities. Resuming my through hike, I discovered I had lost an incredible amount of conditioning during 5 days off the trail. I could hardly breathe on the steep climbs, my legs felt weak all day, and my feet were suddenly tender again. On top of that, it was another oppressively hot, steamy day, which felt all the worse after spending 5 days in air conditioning. The trail was not much help either. 2 long vertical rock climbs welcomed me back to the Appalachian Trail. Thanks to a combination of all these factors, it took me 3.5 hours to hike those 6 miles, even though I took no long breaks. That is depressing. I have not hiked at that slow pace in hundreds of miles. Good thing I have 2 14-mile days planned. That will allow me to ease myself back into shape. It's 9 p.m. Crazy and I have our tents pitched next to a busy road known as the Old Orange Turnpike. What with all the traffic and racket coming from a nearby rifle range, it's not an ideal spot for sleep. However, a piped spring a half-mile down the road is actually running, and water is the key factor on this part of the Appalachian Trail during this hot, dry summer. Despite the noise, I'm having a pleasant evening. Crazy Charlie turns out to be an amusing companion when he's not wrapped up in spinning fables about himself. It appears that I still have one more major challenge remaining on this adventure, finding my good hiking pace again. It will probably take a few days, so I will just have to hang in there and do my best for a while. When I do find it, the history of this hike tells me that it will probably on a day when I need to get somewhere by a certain time, and it will come when everything looks hopeless. That will be fun. I would like to have one more finest hour on this trip. It's been a long while since the last one. Sunday the 7th of August 1983, mile 1355.8. I didn't sleep very well last night. The firing at the rifle range died down about dusk, but the traffic on the Orange Turnpike continued all night. When morning came, I had trouble dragging myself out of my sleeping bag. Some of this difficulty was no doubt due to reading in the guidebook some highlights of the trail today, like Agony Grind and the Lemon Squeezer. Remembering all the 6 stretches of trail in New Jersey and New York that did not rate the name Agony Grind, I kind of had to wonder what the hell that would be like. Physically, I was still only 50% today. My legs continued to feel weak, but my feet were less tender. Several stiff climbs in the first 1.5 miles helped me warm up. When I came to Agony Grind, it turned out to be no worse than countless other stretches of trail around here. It helped that I was climbing down rather than ascending. At one spot, I had to hang down a rock outcrop from my fingers and jump a few feet, never pleasant with a heavy pack. At another spot, I had to crawl under a huge tree which had blown down across the trail. Nevertheless, I encountered nothing life-threatening. I crossed New York Route 17 just after descending Agony Grind and entered Harriman State Park, a place historic on the AT. When the idea of this long-distance trail was conceived in 1921, only a few sizable stretches of existing trail could be incorporated. The first section of trail to be constructed specifically for the Appalachian Trail was blazed in this park. Harriman State Park in 1983 is a sad, lovely place that is just too close to a major metropolitan area, New York City. The woods are mature, open and airy and filled with stately old trees. All this beauty just makes the large amounts of trash strewn all over the forest more depressing. I saw a couple of deer along the trail today, but no views worth mentioning. The tall trees and their high canopy of leaves kept the underbrush from growing along the trail, so it was well cleared for a change. A lot of stiff little climbs though, and many scrambles over rocky outcrops. After 10 rather rough miles, I arrived at the Appalachian Trail crossing of the park's Arden Valley Road. A snack bar and a water faucet were located a 1/4 mile down that road from the AT. It was a steaming hot day and my water bottle was empty. I stashed my backpack in the woods and headed over. The facilities were alongside a public beach on the shore of the enormous Lake Tiarati. I expected the place to be lively on a sweltering Sunday afternoon in August. In this expectation, I was not disappointed. It is said that the best time to visit New York City is on a weekend, because all the New Yorkers are out of town. Today, I found out where they all go, Lake Tiarati. Thousands of people thronged all around Tiarati Circle, the park road on which the snack bar was located. I've been to Central Park in New York City many times on beautiful summer Sunday afternoons, and I've never seen anything close to the hordes of people at Tiarati Circle today. You could not walk 2 feet in any direction without bumping into somebody. It was like rush hour on Manhattan subway. Somehow I found the snack bar. I bought a large Coke and asked the girl behind the counter for directions to the water faucet. She offered to fill my water bottle, an offer on which I was quick to take her up. I do not know if I could ever have found one little faucet in that sea of humanity. I drank the Coke and walked back to the Appalachian Trail, grabbing a quick snack out of my munchies before resuming the hike. It was the first food I had eaten since breakfast, a result of the insufficient amount of water I had been carrying earlier. I arrived at William Bryan's shelter at 5 o'clock, completely spent. It was a relief to have completed my 14 miles and call it a day. I was a little depressed in having needed to hike most of the day in order to cover those 14 miles, but I was pleased to have found the willpower to push my layover softened body that far. What a wonderful surprise I had in store after lifting the cover off the shelter's water supply, a spring-fed well. Not only was the well dry, but the thick coating of dust on the bottom told me that it had not seen water in quite a while. Maybe I should have taken the bleached white cattle skull crawling with scorpions lying nearby, or the circling vultures overhead as an omen. It's 10 minutes to 6 as I write this. I have less than a half cup of water remaining in my canteen. So much for my planned 14-mile day. The guidebook mentions a brook 2 more miles up the trail. It is labelled as a reliable source of water. I'm not optimistic. I've passed several muddy trickles in New Jersey and New York that have received the same rating. Nothing is dependable this summer. I'm probably just wasting my time, but I cannot camp here. I'm not angry though. It's pointless to lose your temper over factors which you cannot control. There is too much beauty in the world to let a little thing like hunger and thirst, 2 things, ruin your day. Still, I don't like the way that squirrel over there is snickering at me. I think I'll go over there and pound the little bastard. Hey Rocky, are you looking at me? Are you looking at me? Later. I left the Bryan shelter at 6 o'clock. It had taken an hour for me to regroup, psychologically more than physically. All day long, I had been driving this out-of-shape body towards a single goal, that shelter. Then I discovered that I had to push it farther to water that probably did not exist. It was a somewhat discouraging prospect. Actually, another more immediate psychological hurdle confronted me, the depressingly impressive rock climb just past the shelter. I wanted no part of it. After an hour of resting and staring at that daunting climb, I slunk back out on the trail. The climb was rough. A short while later, I hit another climb similar to the first, but longer. This one was actually worth the effort. There were beautiful perspectives to the south and west from the top, followed by comparable views to the southeast a bit farther along. The humidity cut down on the visibility, however. I could barely make out the Hudson River less than 10 miles away. After quite a steep descent, I arrived at the crossing of the Palisades Interstate Parkway. It was an extremely busy 4-lane divided highway, but the Appalachian Trail did not go over it or under it. It went directly across, making for an exciting experience of picking and opening and darting across 2 southbound lanes with a 50-pound pack on my back. I was immediately treated to a repeat of that adventure while crossing the northbound lanes from the centre island a moment later. A note was tucked up on a tree at the point where the Appalachian Trail re-entered the woods on the other side. I knew what it contained before I read it. Bad news about Beachy Bottom Brook, the reliable water source for which I was striving. The note said that the stream was bone dry and the next source of water on the trail was a drinking fountain at the summit of Bear Mountain, more than 4 miles ahead. I had no chance of making it that far today. The note mentioned a service area a quarter mile down the parkway with a gas station that had water as well as candy, soda and snack munchies. I hiked about 5 minutes to find a good campsite and dropped off my pack. Throwing my wallet, water bottle and water bag into a stuff sack, I returned to the road. As the rest area was between the northbound and southbound lanes of the highway, I was treated to that dangerous crossing of the northbound lanes 2 more times on that round trip, but it was better without the pack. They had the nerve to ask 65 cents for a 12-ounce can of Coke. I was so outraged that I only bought 3 of them. The ice cream machine was out of order, and I already had candy and snacks in my pack, so I didn't buy anything else. I filled my water bottle and my water bag from the faucet in the men's room and headed back to the trail to make camp. I arrived back here at 8 o'clock, pitched my tent, and became very angry at myself. I had thrown away my empty lighter just before leaving the trail Monday, and I forgot to pick up another. I got lights from my stove from Crazy last night and this morning, but he had already gone on ahead today. About 100 people must have been at the service area, but it did not even occur to me to try bumming a book of matches from one of them. Bread and Coke for dinner tonight. What a dork. I started coming around towards the end of the day. I estimate that physically I'm now at about 70%. Because of the extra miles I was compelled to hike today in order to reach water, only 12 hiking miles stand between me and the monastery tomorrow. Even in my current condition, I should have no trouble making it there by 4 o'clock. That is the time at which I have been told I must arrive in order to receive dinner and a room for the night. That 12-mile hike is my modest goal for tomorrow.